Graham, Michigan is the latest book that I put out with Triumph. It went out earlier in August. It's the second book that I've written. You can find this on Amazon right now. You can find it in any bookstore around here for the most part, I believe. They should be all out. And I also have Mountaintop, that is the story of Michigan's 1997 championship season that I co-wrote with Mark Snyder, who used to work at the Free Press, not at the same time as I did. For me, my background covering Michigan anyway, I started covering Michigan in 2011. My first game was Brady Hoke's first game. So my first game was the one that got rained out against Western, and Dave Brandon strong-armed the Western AD into canceling it. That was the first game that I covered at Michigan. That was a wild day. I remember that one very well. And so I covered all of Brady Hoke, missed Rich, covered all of Brady Hoke, was here through most of Jim Harbaugh, and left the Michigan beat around 2021 when I moved from MLive to the Free Press to the Athletic. And I'm now a senior writer at the Athletic, writing about the NFL draft and the NFL, Detroit Lions, et cetera, et cetera. But I spent a lot of time covering Michigan, so that was kind of the pitch when they came to me and asked if I wanted to do this project, because the book is essentially a history book. It's a story, maybe a 20,000-foot view in some ways, of how the program became what it is, starting all the way back from the very beginning and going all the way through as best I could, in a short amount of time, as best I could all the way through to the end. The book, I kind of chunked it up into three parts. So the first, I would say, third of the book is about the coaching lineage, the coaching history, the head coaches, starting with Fielding Yost and going all the way through Jim Harbaugh. I actually finished this book right as they were winning the national title in 2023. So that's where the timeline kind of ends. So some of the 2024 stuff and the Sharon Moore stuff's not in there. But the coaching lineage, how the program became itself, all the challenges that they overcame and faced, and some that they didn't overcome, some that they didn't handle particularly well, all that stuff. I did 3 chapters in here on the Heisman winners. So one on Tom Harmon, one on Desmond Howard, and one on Charles Woodson. I'll touch on some of that stuff here in a second when we get through to some of that. And then I did, my original thought was it'd be cool if I could do a book where, because I wanted to make the whole thing about the players as best I could. I wanted most of it to be about the players. First third is, in fact, the story of the coaches, but most of this book is about the players and the people who sort of built this family that is a very unique thing inside of college football. And so the back half of the book, my original idea was maybe I'll do my picks for, the best 2 or 3 at every position or something like this. And I was like, this is impossible. I can't do that. There's way too many. So I ended up just sort of going through and picking the guys that I thought were sort of worthy of highlighting and kind of going through the lineage of over the last, let's say, 100 years. So the best quarterbacks, the best running backs, the best receivers, offensive and defensive linemen, linebackers, et cetera, all the way through the secondary. And sort of highlighting those guys and sort of how the program passes itself from one era to the next and on and on and on. And the thing I think I found most enjoyable about this is that most things about Michigan's program are very explainable if you know the history, and everything really does sort of tie together, and a lot of it dates back to Fielding Yost. And that was the most fascinating thing for me, someone who's spent so much time around modern Michigan football. I hadn't really researched much on Fielding Yost. And so getting more into his story, how he became who he became, what his lineage was, someone who grew up in the Civil War South, post Civil War South, did not go to school until he was 12 or 13 years old, was became a lawyer at a young age, became the town deputy of his high school or his school there. This is where he went to school, his town that he grew up in, when he was 17, and then was just this voracious reader at a time when nobody else, really knew what to do with him. He just sort of kept blossoming and blossoming, very competitive guy, eventually stumbles into football at the very early stages in the late 1800s when he was at law school in West Virginia, becomes obsessed with it, and then the reason why he became the coach that he became when he starts his programs, and obviously he matriculates to Michigan in time and builds, this monster that becomes what it becomes, is he's the first person, I think, in all of football, college, professional, whatever, to take the rule book, read every word of it, master it, and try to figure out how to get around every single rule in the rule book. And if you watched any of Jim Harbaugh's games, That's about what Jim Harbaugh did. Yeah, I mean, 100 years later, and I don't know if it was on purpose one or the other, but like that's the thought. That's how Fielding Yost created the program. His nickname was Hurry Up Yost. Fielding, he was the inventor of the Hurry Up offense, and in those days, the Hurry Up offense consisted of he organized the offense and defense, or especially the offense, I should say, in the in-between moments of plays. So back in the day, a play would end. There wasn't a play clock. There'd be a lot of milling around and standing about, and it wasn't really organized. Yost was the first person to organize his offense to get plays off at a faster rate. So they were running plays faster than other teams could even line up and defend. And that's why you look back in the history books and you see these scores 150 to nothing, 200 to nothing, all these crazy scores, because nobody could do anything with it. So Yost was the modern, or the true founder of so many things in football. He claimed to be the founder of so many other things in football. That's another wrinkle here, is his ego and his sort of bravado matched his intelligence and his, aptitude and everything else for the game. And I think that him as a person, as a coach and as a thinker, like as a person off the field, he wasn't a great guy. Racist, the Willis Ward scandal, all that stuff, not good. Everything that he did after he was a coach, you can question. It's not a great situation, although, a man of his time in a different era, all that stuff. But as a coach, a thinker, I really feel like the standard he set for every head coach to follow at this school from whenever he retired, 1927 and on, was and is to this day, you have to be someone who thinks about the game in ways that no one else does, and you have to be someone that's willing to challenge yourself to be better or reaching for something more, even when it seems kind of impossible. That was Yost's stock and trade. That was the first kind of statement that he made. He just did so many things differently. They were the first college football dynasty, and that kind of kicks off the whole thing. So the book, a lot of it covers that, the matriculation of from Yost through Harry Kipke to Fritz Kreisler and how much he changed the program, and then of course into Schembechler. And there's a lot of time spent on the Bo era, the great start, why it started great, his relationship with Woody Hayes. I wrote a lot about that in this book. How he took everything that Woody Hayes did and essentially made it an Ohio State junior here at Michigan. And that's the other part of this too, is when you go back and you watch games from 1969, 1970, 75, the early days of Bo Schembechler, you'll see run plays and basic concepts that I swear to you they still run today. They will run tomorrow in the stadium. Like, it's dressed up and different, but the core foundation of what Michigan football looks, feels, sounds, and smells like has kind of been the same for like 100 years. And that's maybe the biggest lesson I think I learned in this whole project, is there's so much connective tissue there that I guess I never really, it makes sense because it's a familial program. Like I've often called it, it really does compare to a real family in that they fight, they error, they make up, they fall apart and fight again. But then they also come together and they do these great things, and they do them sometimes out of nowhere when you've never, expected, and they have lasting relationships and all that stuff. So it's a really interesting story, I feel like, throughout the history, and it really does run alongside sort of the growth and the history of football in America. Like Fielding Yost's original Michigan program was the original famous program in this country, the original famous football team in America. And a lot of, I wouldn't say every college football program is derivative of Michigan, but a lot of them are. Most of them, except for a very handful, are. And so that's another lesson that was sort of learned in this book, too. And another thing I wanted to talk about, and then we'll do some questions, if anybody has any, is one of the things, excuse me really quick here, that I came across when we were doing the 1997 book was how interesting and dynamic the modern quarterback lineage at Michigan was, and how much it, I think, changed and was at the forefront of change in college football in terms of the pro-style offense, in terms of being able to recruit NFL quarterbacks. And that starts with Jim Harbaugh when he comes here in 1984, 83, 84, and it goes all the way through, Chad Henne. Because, Jim Harbaugh, Elvis Gerbach, Todd Collins, Brady, Greasy, all the, I'm probably going to forget a couple here, Dreisbach, all these other guys that come through here. If you look at the stretch of time from 1986 through 2007, let's say, the number of Michigan had a professional quarterback in every single cycle, in every class. A guy was drafted or went to the NFL. Half of those guys played or won in Super Bowls, not just Tom Brady. They had careers that like spanned decades and all this stuff. The Michigan quarterback lineage at that time, it doesn't get talked about a lot because Michigan ran the ball so much and always has. But like if you really go back and you think about it, they were the first Big Ten team in the mid '80s to start airing it out and throwing it more. That success attracted more quarterback talent, which attracted more receiver talent, which leads to Greg McMurtry and Desmond Howard and Derek Alexander and so on and so forth, David Terrell and on and on and on. And it leads, one thing just sort of built on top of another. So Gary Moeller, Cam Cameron, Jim Harbaugh start this. We're going to throw the ball in the mid '80s, and it just sort of keeps going up and up and up. And the stories that I'd heard over the years about the competition between, when Tom Brady, Brian Griese, Scott Dreisbach, and Scott Loeffler are all in the same quarterback room, and these are all NFL level talents, and the mental strain that they're going through is just insane. Like this, back then, you couldn't transfer, you couldn't leave. It was you went to one place, and you were lucky if you got 1 year. And so it was a very different world at the time too. So that was another fascinating part of this book that was super interesting to me. So, but also, anybody has any questions, I'd be glad to talk about whatever you guys want to chat about. Yes, sir. Oh, awesome. Welcome. Okay. Right. Yeah, right. You're on the perfect day here, yeah.
Oh, thank you. Did you catch everything I said?
Yes, I did. I heard you.
I suppose my question, and this may be uninteresting for seasoned football watchers, is what differentiates Michigan's college team from other college teams, whether in good ways or
right.
bad?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that the difference in the good way, to me, is the familial aspect of it is deeper, and it has longer stemmed roots than just about any other program that I can think of. Like, I cover the NFL, so I'm around guys in NFL locker rooms. And if you go around to NFL locker rooms and you talk to guys, where'd you go to college? And they'll say, oh, I went to Tennessee, and they've got like maybe a gift bag in the locker or whatever. Like, maybe he'll have a teammate somewhere or another guy that went to Tennessee that he'll see every now and again in the league, and they'll come across paths, and they'll enjoy each other's company for 5 seconds, and they'll move on about their day. The Michigan guys, it's like they are inseparable all the way through the rest of their career. They don't, it doesn't, they're brothers all the way through, good and ill. Like, if they're on the same team, lockers are next to each other. If, they play against each other on Sundays, you'll see them exchanging the jerseys and doing everything. I mean, it's a different level of, like, Lloyd Carr, who obviously the Hall of Fame coach who was here and won the title in '97, used to tell the guys that they don't need to join a fraternity or any sort of club here at Michigan because the football team is the biggest and best fraternity that the school has. And it's the most exclusive one, and it's the one that you have to be, special, all that stuff. And those guys take it very, very serious. They're very protective of their legacy of the program, and I would, to the other side of that, the not so good things sometimes can come into play when they can be overprotective and they can be blind to certain things. Like if something's going wrong or something needs to be called out, sometimes they struggle to want to admit that, maybe something didn't go the way that it should have in a certain situation. But I would also add that, the other part of that makes them unique is, I believe, for the most part, and I think Harbaugh said this when he left, that they all make mistakes, they all make errors, they all have things that don't go the way that they should have or would have liked to. But by and large, they all try to make them right and try to fix them before they leave and try to make it as good as they can. And I think that's the commonality here. Is there's a selflessness, and it's to me, as someone who's been around football my whole life, football is about team. It's about family, and it's about doesn't work with less than 11 that are just kind of breathing together. So that's really the hallmark of the program. Like I think I put in the introduction that the best quote I've ever read that describes them, the program, Michigan football, and it used to be, it might still be in there on the wall, is the law of the jungle. the strength of the wolf is the pack, and the strength of the pack is the wolf. You are a family. You are someone who needs to carry your piece of the rope, and they take that very seriously. And I think that a lot of places like to think that they do, and I'm sure some do, and I'm sure that's a nice thing for a lot of places. But it's just not like this. The number of guys who played in the NFL on some of these teams, it's staggering. Like I did a stat in this book, I think it was, and in the last one, where there was a stretch of time from 1998 through like 2017, maybe 2020, that a member of the 1997 title team was in every Super Bowl, was in every one of them. Like that's how like those guys were just so solid and just like, you know, winning people. I think that's what makes Michigan sort of different is their commitment to the family aspect of it, and it's real. It's not a made up or sort of patronized thing, I guess I would say. Yes, sir. Absolutely.
I have like three questions.
Oh yeah, let's do it.
Why did the program appeal Connor Stallions? And I don't know if you want to make some comments on that. And then why did they not cooperate? Or is that, you were saying that, is that just the way, was it tradition or?
With the NCAA?
Yeah, the
right.
coaches in Harbaugh.
So,
and one other question is there anything really unusual you've seen in the locker room, or just around anything unusual that just, I don't know,
okay,
just out of ordinary?
Yeah, I'll think on this one. I would say for the Connor stuff, I don't know everything that they are appealing. I think that they're appealing the fine. Are they not? I think that they're appealing the fine because the fine was massive. They got a really big, I think it was one of the biggest ones the NCAA's ever given, if not the biggest. So I think that they're appealing that. They're appealing a couple things on it. I don't know if they're appealing the full extent of it, because that was my original thought too. Is like, why are you just let it go, just do it and be done with it and move on. But I do think that they are appealing the fine. I also was wondering too, and I don't think this has happened. I mean, maybe he doesn't care. Is Harbaugh got a 10-year show cause penalty, which is one of the biggest ones I've ever seen, and I don't think he wants to coach in college again, so he probably doesn't care. But that was one that I almost wondered about. Like maybe he'll be like, I don't know about all this. This seems. Maybe he'll do that down the road in another day. I don't know. But like that was the other one that I kind of wondered about, because it did seem kind of severe in some ways to me. Because honestly, what they did, what they were accused of doing, and what they were kind of caught doing, was illegal. But they also aren't under NCAA rules in terms of the advanced scouting, buying the tickets, and going to the things. Everything else they did is legal. Is, you know, stealing signs in a game is legal. I have a chapter in our 97 book about Lloyd getting signs stolen by Northwestern. Remember all those years Northwestern beat Michigan in the 90s? Like by like 2 points? They were stealing signs. That's what's happened forever. So a lot of that is just how it works. They were caught doing some things that were illegal, but they also have no obligation to the NCAA to cooperate. That's the weird part about college football that makes no sense. It's like the same exact thing from the North Carolina case from all those years ago, where they had the academic fraud and they just didn't cooperate, and it went away because it was like, well, we don't have subpoena power here. We can't make you talk. So yeah, I think to me a lot of it, they don't want to talk because they don't want to open themselves up to something more, I think a lot of the times. But yeah, the rest of it, I don't know. And then weird stuff that I've seen a lot of stuff. I think that the stuff that sticks in my mind it's mostly Harbaugh related. The one that I can remember the most, and I tell this story a couple times, I flew with them to Italy and Paris when they went on those spring break trips, if you guys remember that. And when we got to Italy, we got to, you know, whatever the big airport there is in Rome, and we're standing there, and we're in customs, so it's us and it's me and the Michigan football team and the coaching staff and like thousands of other people standing in the customs line. And we're all standing there waiting with passports to get through, and Harbaugh, who they had just had their youngest child at the time, I can't remember his name, but they just had him. He's a baby. He was there, and like he was like, this wait is taking too long. Like, I don't like this. He pulls the thing up, the little security rail, grabs his like whole family. They walk out and then just cut the whole line of like thousands of people and then get through. And they got through customs, got through the whole thing, and they were out of that airport like 2 hours before everybody else. And I was like, where does one get the confidence in a foreign country to just like, I'm cutting this line and with my whole family and away we go. Like a lot of it is that, is Harbaugh's. And then I remember being there with, that was around the time too, he was so like, everything he did here was headline news. Everybody knew. If he walked down the street out here, everybody would, he'd get stopped. There, nobody knew who the hell he was. So if he'd walk down the street, people would be like, what are you guys? And he would just be another random person walking around. That was also kind of strange to see, is how he was just a normal person over there that nobody knew what was happening or what was going on. It's kind of cool. But yeah, a lot of Jim stories. Anybody else going? Yeah.
So there's been a lot written about Michigan football over the last 100 years. What kind of in your new book kind of is new or stands out, or something that maybe like people haven't read about or heard about before?
Yeah, I think that what I tried to do that was a little bit different is try to tell the stories as best I could of the connections between eras and why these guys were brought here, why they came here, their personal backgrounds, their histories, and sort of to try to lay out as best I could, why there's so many similarities from era to era. Because that's the thing. You could talk to Michigan fans forever, and they'll say, this new player reminds me of a guy from 20 years ago, or this guy reminds me of a guy. And a lot of times, that's not accidental. Like a lot of these guys were there because another guy 15 years prior did something, and that kid reminded of him of something on tape, so they were like, let's give him an offer. So there was a lot of connectivity that I guess I just didn't realize that I tried to sort of introduce in the book. Like Desmond Howard, for example, comes here and he's a running back, and he wants to be a running back. That's why he came here. He wanted to run behind the big line. They moved him to receiver immediately, and we're kind of like, we do know what to do with you. It may not seem like we know what we're doing here, but it's going to work. They did the exact same thing with Anthony Carter. It was the exact same situation. So, those are, Woodson, there was times you can go back into the 70s even and look at how they handled certain guys that had a lot of talent. I mean, it's just a lot of really interesting connections. Like one thing led to this, which led to that, which led to that I don't think sometimes if you put them together that you kind of quite realize it. Like another thing, too, that comes up a lot for me in some of this in the last recent years that I've done so much work on the 97 book was that era of time, 1993 through 1997, was, I think, like maybe the most critical time in the modern history of the program. Like when Moeller got fired in 95, they were this close to cutting the Schembechler line and not hiring another Schembechler coach ever again. And then just being another whatever, just being you're just another. You're Wisconsin. No offense to Wisconsin, but you're not a special. They were that close, and 96 doesn't go great. 95 didn't go great, and then 97 out of nowhere they pull it out of the ditch. They go 12-0. They win the title. They get a huge deal from Nike. College football explodes the next year. Now this is $1 billion operation. Like that to me, that's another thing that I guess I've learned is that time. What Lloyd and those guys did from 95 to 97 to fix it, I think was maybe the most important thing that has happened maybe in the last 100 years of the program. Because if that didn't happen, I don't know. I think you'd be talking about we'd be talking about Michigan like we talk about Tennessee more. I do think that time would have changed some things, but that was a critical time as well. Anybody else? Ma'am? Yeah. Well, I think that's the thing is a standard, and I think I read about that a lot in the book too, is, positional standards. Each player sets a standard for the next player that comes along, and the coaches do the same thing. But the recruiting standard at Michigan, and that's another part of it that makes it different. Like I used to get questions all the time from guys and gals who would cover Ohio State, and they would be like, do they really care like that much here about academics? Like, is it really... Because everybody would, no, it's made up. You're making that up. And I'm like, no, they really do. Like, they will turn people down because they can't get them in here academically. Like, they still do that to a degree. It's loosened in recent years, but they don't recruit a certain type of kid, a kid that doesn't want to work hard, a kid that, doesn't, have enthusiasm for what's going on. Like, Harbaugh, not to bring it all the way back to him, but he's, kind of a central figure here. Before he was done, he made this list, like a sheet, a scoring chart, where he scored recruits based on like his perfect ideal recruit, right? 5 points for this, a maximum of scale. I can't remember whatever one of it was. It was like hustle, academic. It was like 27 things. It was all these things. And if a guy didn't score, beyond a certain level, like he was like, he doesn't get an offer. That's it. Period. End of story. That doesn't happen at other places. They just don't. They don't take into account at most places fit within the culture of the university, which I think that they have to do here in ways that, like, a Notre Dame also has to do this, because you can't go to school at Michigan, a place that is super challenging academically. If you can't handle it, you're going to fail out, right? So, like, that's why they really are strict on a lot of that stuff. So I do think that part of the reason why they've been able to, A, sustain a lot of it over the years is their reputation with that and recruiting, but then B, is they've targeted, over the years, they've tried to anyway target a certain type of kid that is, going to improve, going to be a good investment, I guess, in the long haul. Whereas so many other places you see it's throwing darts at a wall. If I throw 100 darts and I hit 40 of them, I think I'm okay, but I don't care what happens to the other 60. Like, that's not really what they do here. So that is a big difference, and I definitely think that, their identification of a level of what it takes to be here and the commitment and sacrifice of what it takes to be here, and that it's not going to be like every place else. I can remember stories hearing from Harbaugh's years where part of the punishment he would give these guys is you have to come in on Saturdays in the off season. If you did something wrong, Friday night, Saturday night, you have to sit in my office with me from 7 p.m. till 2 a.m. so you can't go out and party. So I know where you're at, and we're going to hang out here and just, like, read books. Like, that's it's different. They don't do that at other places. It's a different thing here, and I think that that's held up for the most part over all these years.
Nick, I have one for you.
Yes.
I saw that the 2026 class is the first class that will not have an in-state recruit. Is that?
How about that?
Yeah, I know, wild, right? Is that plus NIL? Are there any concerns that these traditions, this legacy, is something that? How do we hold on to it? How do you?
Oh, that's a great question, and that's like, if I had the answer to that one, I'd be the commissioner of whatever the new college football thing is, I guess. But, like, that's the 100. Yeah, I mean, I didn't realize that, but I mean, it makes sense, right? That there's so much movement now, and there's so much you can transfer. I mean, I do NFL draft stuff, right? So I scout guys that are fifth-year players that have been at 5 schools. And you're like, what? Like, how does that? Like, what kind of experience are you getting in that situation? All that. So, I am very curious to see how that works here. I think that you have to you have to be very careful recruiting and bringing kids in. Ohio State's going to have the same issue outside of your footprint, because the further out you get, the less special it becomes for certain kids. If you grow up in Michigan has the benefit where a lot of kids on the East Coast, like a lot of kids from New York, love Michigan. A lot of kids in California also do. But if you're from somewhere else in the Midwest, maybe it's a different story. So I think you have to be very careful with that. And then the other question too that I have is, like, what is it really even? What's a recruiting class, a high school recruiting class, even really mean at this point? If it's like these guys are coming in 2026, the transfer portal class, I would feel like would be almost as important or maybe more important. And there's no promises that these guys. So I mean, it's a completely different situation. The whole thing has changed. And honestly, I don't even think these guys even know yet. I think they're all, the programs, the coaches are just kind of flying by their pants and making adjustments as they go, because it is not like it used to be, not even close. And it changed like that, like overnight. So that's the big shock, I think, to the system. But yeah, wow, crazy. Like 10 years ago, there'd have been 15 kids, no problem. Ohio State would have signed 20 kids from Ohio. Like, that's not going to happen anymore. That is going to be a challenge for all these places going forward. Yeah, for sure. Anybody else? Good? One more?
Do you have another? Awesome.
On the follow-up to that one, then, like, where do you see, like, a culture like Michigan's, or like these are big programs that we look up to, where are they going in the next, like, 10, 20 years because if, like you said, there's no loyalty, or you're not from the state.
I think that what seems inevitable to me is major Division I college football is going to have to remove itself from the NCAA. It's going to have to be something else. It's going to have to be in its, like, call it another 4-letter organization, whatever you want to say. But to me, you have to find a way to put these schools on even platforms or more even competitive levels. I would take the 60 richest schools and say, you guys go make your own league out of the NCAA. Everything else that you do can stay within the NCAA confines, basketball, hockey, everything else, all the women's sports. But football, you're going to go and do your own thing. So that way, Michigan, Georgia, Alabama, USC, Notre Dame, Ohio State, they can all go and make decisions collectively knowing that they all have enough money to do what they want to do. Be it a salary cap, be it recruiting rules, be it geographical, rivalry protections, whatever they want to do. They have enough money to make decisions and not to worry about, Purdue's not going to be able to afford this, so we can't do this. And that's going to, if and when that happens, and I think that's inevitable, I just do, it's going to break up. You're not going to have the traditional Big Ten type situations. A lot of that would change. But to me, that's the only way that this can go forward is you have to find a way, because you're paying kids now. You're paying them, and that's the competition, is who has the most money. You can't realistically ask a coach to go to Indiana and, survive long-term at that level against a place like this or Georgia or Alabama. It's just not going to work. So they have to be more honest with themselves, and that's going to require the universities sort of, and some of them admitting, we can't afford to do this anymore. And I don't know when or if that's going to happen, but that's sort of, I feel like they're at that spot now, and a lot of them have been burned, the conference shake-up the last time. I mean, a bunch of them got left out in the cold. The Pac-12 got obliterated because they thought they were more valuable than they were, and I think what that all taught us, too, is there's not that many super valuable brands in college football. There's 15. Michigan's one of them. There's not that many. And those are the ones that sort of are going to make the decisions on what happens going forward, and everybody else is going to sort of, tail along after, I would think. But it's a great question. I have no idea. I kind of have a gut feeling that would say that the sport of college football will be almost unrecognizable to someone like a couple years ago in 10 years. It'll be so different that, we'll figure it out as we go, but it's going to be a big change, and it already has been. I mean, if we think about it, from 5 years ago even. So, yeah, it's wild times. Yeah, I think it's going to be a crazy thing. You're going to have to do something. Either they have to break away from it, or the NCAA is going to have to change itself, which is also possible. But the other part of that too is the NCAA. I think a lot of times people get that confused with they think it's this a group of people sitting somewhere, a body that just work for the NCAA and they just govern the thing. It's not. It's the NCAA by definition is the presidents of the schools. So every Michigan's president, Ohio State's president, that's the NCAA. Those are the people that make these decisions, and it's just you have to just agree on something and make a decision, and that's the hard part. Ego gets involved in everything else, and money and what have you. But I do think that football's so popular, you could split it up and say we have a high money division of college football and a one that kind of reminds us of old time college football, and they would both get watched. Everybody would watch. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I don't know what's all going to happen with it, but hopefully they keep playing. I think that's what I would say. I think they will keep playing. That's too many big stadiums to fill otherwise, one or the other.
You mentioned, I guess, the conferences over time becoming unrecognizable.
Yeah.
I guess I'm curious, what is the relationship between the bigger programs and the smaller programs, Michigan, Ohio State top the program you kind of talked about?
It's within the Big Ten, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's fascinating because Michigan in the old days, as of 5 years ago, Michigan and Ohio State ran the league. Just to be blunt, they did. They had more money than everybody. They had more TV eyeballs on every game by double than basically everybody. And frankly, after I think it was in it was after Harbaugh got the job. It was 2016 or 17 when Fox paid the Big Ten $500 million or whatever it was just to do the Michigan-Ohio State game. They were running the show. So every decision that was made, if they didn't want to do it, it wasn't going to get done. And there is internal strife within the Big Ten. I think that Jim Delaney did a great job over the years of sort of keeping that under the surface. And then when COVID happened, you saw the league sort of fracture. Like I remember Nebraska was like, we're not okay with this. Ohio State disagreed with Big Ten rules. And then you saw some infighting happen with that one too. And it's been like, that's part of the reason why Michigan State people, I mean, obviously it's a natural, geographical rivalry, but they don't feel that they have as loud a voice at the table. And in the old days, they didn't, I mean, I don't know about now. They probably don't either now, but like, that's just how the sport works. And I think that it's always been this like unspoken thing. And that's part of the thing that's like, they're going to have to get over that going forward. Like why does Michigan play New Mexico State? Why is that happening? Why aren't you just playing a 12-game schedule against like Wisconsin, Ohio State? Good team, every time, every game, every week. Not, well, we'll give this team a tomato can game so they can get money, so they can keep going. Like the whole thing is kind of like a big, like scheme that runs round and round. So I do think in a lot of ways they respect the money and everything else. But yeah, there's definitely like, you can go back through history, even the Bo years where who was it? Michigan State's AD voting to keep Michigan out of the Rose Bowl over petty, nonsense. I mean, that stuff's happened for forever and ever. And that's just, Michigan, Ohio State have always been sort of the big boys in the Big Ten. That might have changed a little bit in recent years, but probably not.
Oh, okay. So I was curious as well, just with the whole conference kind of ganged up on them, trying to get Harbaugh suspended and everything like that as soon as possible. But you're saying these kinds of things have happened over time.
Oh yeah,
so
I mean you're never going to see like the days of the league being collegial. And there was a time I feel like where that happened in the 80s and probably to a degree in the 70s when a lot of those coaches would, at least publicly get along. When Urban Meyer got hired at Ohio State, that ended for good. He ended all of that. Like he was the first guy in the Big Ten to come in and recruit other people's commits. Like that was like unheard of when Urban Meyer. Think about that. That was like maybe a little more than a decade ago. It was unheard of in college football to recruit someone else's commit. And now it's like, well, what's that mean? That doesn't mean anything. And so like, a lot of those things have been broken over the years. And there's been a lot of, like you remember when Penn State went through all of its stuff with the Sandusky thing and they had all those guys eligible. I can remember when Illinois and like 4 other teams, they were eligible to transfer. So like Illinois and a couple other Big Ten teams sent their whole staff to State College to recruit all these players right off the campus. And then when they got to media days in Chicago, they were like about ready to fight. I remember that one because it was just like, so there's not a lot of friendly behavior there in the league, I would say. Never really has been.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Other questions? Are we good? Awesome, guys. I appreciate everybody coming. If anybody wants a book, I got a couple up here, so come on up and let's make a deal.
Awesome.
Thanks
Everyone. Thanks, Nick.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much.